Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. Another episode of Meaningful Live. Hurricanes and wars. What lies behind man-made and natural disasters? This program is dedicated in honor of our dear friend and generous supporter, Dina Dornbush, in celebration of her birthday on the 21st of Tishrei. With the recent devastation wreaked by the hurricanes, first Helene, and then the hurricane that struck the entire, from west to east of Florida, we've all seen the scenes, the deaths, unfortunately. But when you think of it in context of everything going on in the world today, we also find the man-made disasters, not just the natural ones. The man-made ones, and I'm specifically speaking about what we find in the Middle East, this ongoing, seemingly endless war, both in the south, in the Gaza and Lebanon, with Iran, from Yemen, and of course I mentioned as well the wars going on in Ukraine. So how do we look at all of this? How are we supposed to navigate? How do we find some direction in a chaotic world? Now, I'm not comparing. Obviously, a man-made disaster is very specific. Human choice, bad choices, and there are people responsible. When it comes to a natural disaster, we say it's an act of God. Is there a human being responsible? Should we have settled in areas where hurricanes happen? Well, that's a long story and a bigger story. Fact of the matter is, you can't really point your finger at anyone. You can point fingers of how the relief is going and how much help and is it organized and all the other aspects that we hear about, but not that very disaster. So I'm not trying to put them together into one pot. I'm speaking from our perspective. When you see chaos, how do you look at it? So it's always good to go back to the beginning. Why is there chaos in this world in the first place? You would think when you see an organized world like ours, with so much balance and such complex ecosystems that seem to really work well and in harmony, you have to wonder, where does chaos come from in the first place? Now we know the chaos theory, that chaos is also part of the order, but I'm talking about a chaos that upsets the balance to the point of violence, to the point of death, to the point of destruction. So it's always good to go back and see the context, how we look at things, what is healthy, what is unhealthy. Because at the end of the day, there's some things we cannot control, but we can control how we navigate it. So I hope this will be helpful to you. To me, it's tremendously powerful and comforting in a way. Not comforting. No one's. It's not pleasant to see death, and to see destruction, and to see havoc, and to see people being hurt. Obviously not. But comforting in a different context of allowing us to somewhat manage and not be completely overwhelmed. When I look back at the so-called, what I like to call the psycho-mystical perspective, the psycho-spiritual perspective on everything that's going on, in a way like science. When you see collisions, when you see different things in the cosmos, and you look at the scientific factors at work behind the scenes, you come away with a whole different perspective on it. So what is the bird's eye view on imbalance, on chaos, on all forms of what we call disasters? And I am including whether it's natural, God-sent, or man-made. I'm including it all in this question. And the answer lies in a very powerful concept, which really gives you an understanding, not just of the symptoms, but the roots. And that's what we really need to get to, the roots of the issues. So this is a topic I have addressed a number of times. We call it the doctrine, sometimes it's called the secret, the doctrine of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is a Hebrew word used by the great mystic, Rabbi Isaac Luria, 16th century mystic, who explained the concept of dissonance in its purest form. When I say purest, I mean at its original root. That initially, and this is also consistent with cosmology today, initially everything was one unified singularity that then began to divide and break down. Similar to when we look at the birth of a child, the conception of a child that begins with the fertilization of an egg by seed, and you have now one cell has been fertilized, has been conceived. That cell will then split into two, and then into 4, into 8, and 16, and at some point into millions, and then billions, and trillions of cells that make up the human being. And it would take 9 months of gestation for the fetus to develop into a child. And here we are, each one of us developed exactly in that fashion. Same thing, you plant a seed in the ground, it's just a seed. But that seed has concentrated within it everything that will grow from that seed. So the same thing, you look at on a cosmological level, called the Big Bang, whatever the words that are used for it, the same idea. There was a concentration of matter and energy that gave way to an explosion, or however it's explained what that caused that explosion. And from that began to develop the seeds of existence. So the same is true, he explains it, on a mystical level, that initially there was a singularity of seamlessness, seamless unity. And it's interesting, physics today says everything is unified. The fact that we see fragments, we see pieces, that's only to the naked eye, the tip of the iceberg. But underneath it all lies an intrinsic unity, whether it's a unity explained by string theory or other theories that explain how the cells, or you can say the DNA, the subatomic structure of existence, is all intertwined and connected in ways that are actually counterintuitive. That atoms and subatomic particles billions of miles away sense each other faster than the speed of light, which proves time and again that there is an intrinsic and inherent unity. So it all began with the unity. Just like I mentioned the cell, one cell. It all began with one unified reality. We'll call it, for lack of a better way of putting it, we'll call it a higher state of spiritual, we can call it divine consciousness. And nothing else was present. In order to create the existence of another consciousness, you need to create space. Think of a brilliant teacher. If he just allows his brilliance to flow forth, there'd be no room for anyone. Everything would be overwhelming. Or think of an ocean that doesn't have boundaries. It would just flood the land, and there'd be no room for space. So the way the Arizal, or known as Isaac Luria, the acronym is known as the Arizal, essentially says what happens is that this seamlessness gave way by so-called receding. That energy receded, what he calls the infinite divine light receded and allowed space. He calls it a whole and an empty space, a perfect circle. Now there's space for another. If you think of it psychologically, essentially all love is based on that. If your love is just flowing, infinitely flowing, it will suffocate everyone around you. You need to create space for someone. And you do that by receding and allowing that space. So now there's space. In that space, he explains, a stream of consciousness entered. From that divine unified consciousness, from that seamless unity and singularity flowed think of it like a laser beam, like a paintbrush if you wish, that in turn would paint and structure all of existence as we know it. So it all begins with a unified whole, a space that creates room for others, and then comes a light, a flow. Similar again, the teacher falls silent, but then begins a stream of consciousness, spoon-feeding this student A, B, C, ideas that slowly grow. As the mind of the recipient expands, the more the recipient can receive. So far, so good. But here's this thing. As soon as you create space for another, so as beautiful as loving that as that sounds, that also creates the potential for conflict. It doesn't mean it has to be that way. So the fact that there is now a duality, meaning not a singularity, leaves room for divisiveness, or it could leave and create harmony. Remember, harmony is essentially harmony within diversity. But diversity does not necessarily mean divisiveness and conflict and discord. Diversity, however, can go both directions. Think of a beautiful painting, a beautiful face, an eloquent symphony. They're all made up of many different parts. As beautiful as the color blue may be or the color red, as beautiful as one musical note may sound, the fact is that real music and real beauty is when you have a confluence, a harmony within diversity. It's not one feature. But as soon as you have more than one identity, more than one entity, you have room. If you organize them properly in a harmonious and synchronous and in sync or synchronicity way, synchronous way I should say, then you have beauty. But if it's disorganized, you have noise. Whereas one singularity would never create conflict, but now the different entities, should they not work together, would create chaos. So essentially, everything that's out of place, any displacement, any form of dissonance is a result of this tzimtzum. So its intention was to create another, so there can be a relationship. But as soon as there's another, there's also room for conflict, different opinions. So what's the counterforce? That's the big question. Okay, what's the counterforce? What's the antidote? The antidote is, going back to that singularity, is not eliminating independent consciousness and individuality. It's finding the ability to transcend your own self, your own ego, and not get trapped in feeling, oh, since I don't feel the other, I'm not really part of them. The fact is, all of existence is one organism. As I mentioned before, one singularity. It just has different manifestations. Now, when you think of it that way, the tragedy of violence, of war, of discrimination, of senseless hatred for one person or one people or one race to another is I'm not looking for the word, absurd is not good enough a word, it's so unfathomable, because it goes counter to the very truth of everything. Imagine all the organs in your body decided that each one of us is independent and we don't work together any longer. Not only don't we work, we compete for the same resources. It's one of the worst things that a type of, when the immune system turns on itself in a human body. And you have that, unfortunately. It's considered a terrible disease. Well, all forms of imbalance is essentially the tzimtzum gone awry, gone off course. So when you talk about any form of trauma, any form of fear, insecurity, where things are not in balance, every dissonance, that's all a result of the tzimtzum. Now, this doesn't necessarily minimize the pain, the loss, the tragedy. It's not what I'm coming to do here. I'm not coming to explain it. I'm coming to understand it, to understand the roots of it. And so ultimately our solution isn't just finding a compromise. Obviously you have to do what you have to do. Someone's coming to attack you. Someone's coming to kill your children. You will defend yourself. You don't just sit down and start pontificating and waxing eloquent about the tzimtzum and how is it possible that people could hate each other. You have to deal with hate directly and protect yourself and all innocent people. The second thing is, even if you do find ways to negotiate, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is not just a negotiation. That's short-term. Those are band-aids. Those are short-term solutions dealing with the symptoms. Ultimately, what you want is a world that comes to understand that we are really all one. And if you hurt me, you're hurting yourself. And if I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. A very basic truth that we're all created in the divine image, and we're all indispensable notes in one great cosmic symphony, all beautiful parts of one beautiful masterpiece. Unfortunately, we become blinded. We become blinded by our own self-interest. We become blinded by our own conviction that we think that we are it, forgetting that internal unity. What do you think is the greatest prayer in Jewish liturgy? We all know the Shema. We just said it Yom Kippur. We say it every day several times. But Yom Kippur, at the end of the day, Hashem Echad, the unity of divine unity, which means not that there's one God, monotheism, and not many gods. There's one reality and not many realities. And all parts of reality are all part of that one reality. If you think about it, it's just some mind-blowing concept that has an effect on everything in life. Technology itself is the greatest testimony to that. Who would ever believed that the parameters and the distance of time and space could be bridged? That you can speak to someone millions of miles away almost instantaneously. You can see images beamed from one end of the world to the other. Now just one end of the world, through the solar system and beyond. It's all testifying that there's some type of inner unity that's there, and we're tapping into it. So once upon a time, yes, you wanted to get a message to someone that lived 100 miles away, and you didn't have vehicles, we didn't have technology. You'd either have to send a donkey or a camel or a postman on a horse or whatever it may be. This is all testimony that the invisible forces of existence are really a unified reality. And this is only going to accelerate that unity. However, what we neglect to remember that unity is not just about convenience and commercialization and playing video games or watching football. It's a unity that's meant to teach us to be united with ourselves, between our minds and our hearts, between our conscious and our superconscious, between the different forces and voices, sometimes conflicting ones, and of course between peoples, communities, families, spouses, families, communities, and nations. Now, yes, it may sound naive, it may sound like a nice dream, because at the end of the day, self-interest lies at the heart of so much. And you look at someone reading Adam Smith's the Capitalism, and you see immediately that it's all about self-interest. But self-interest can be harnessed toward a greater good. So I'm not dismissing self-interest, but if self-interest is the beginning and end of it all, no. The singularity and unity is the beginning and end of it all. And it's interesting, the Founding Fathers sensed that when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. And what we find on our currency of all places, e pluribus unum, in God we trust, e pluribus, from the many one. Understanding that is the principle, founding principle of all coexistence and ability to really work together. So it doesn't begin with the self-interest, it begins with the unity. Then there's the independent self, the conscious independence that I spoke about, and then we have to find a way to coordinate it. So how does that translate to the chaos in our world today? Well, let's start with the man-made disasters. Man-made disasters are very clearly based on human beings in their own distortions or own ill-conceived or worse or even obscene interests can come to the point of not just disagreeing with another, but turning it into war, into violence, into annihilation, into genocide, calling upon for the death of innocent men, women, and children. We've seen it in history and we see it today. That comes from an absolute ignorance, more than ignorance, an absolute called bastardization and distortion of the very essence of why we're here on this earth, to be independent human beings in order to join together, to complement each other, to cross-pollinate. So as I said earlier, you have to do what you have to do. When someone comes to attack you, you have to defend yourself and protect yourself and sometimes preempt that attack for the preservation of peace. That's not called war. That's called actual peace. When you go to war against enemies, when you go to war against a darkness that has attacked you, that's the only way to achieve peace. Then, of course, you try to deal with all the short-term solutions and short-term symptoms. But ultimately the goal is to see it as a wake-up call of reconnecting. You know, when things are going well, people can be each one in their own particular driven by self-interest, but at least there's no war going on. But when you see battle, blood shed, that's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call, just like pain is a wake-up call, that there's a problem to be solved. And then let's move now to natural disasters, or what the insurance policies call acts of God. So there too, interestingly, I once wrote about it. I called it the interview with Francis, I believe. It was an interview with a hurricane. Obviously a fictitious metaphorical piece, but talking why, the devastation that a hurricane creates and asking the hurricane why. And it's interesting that the natural disasters that we call disasters are actually part of the balance of this world. The winds on Earth are like a vacuum cleaner. The earthquakes and volcanoes are market corrections. Now, if there were no human beings in their path, we wouldn't call it a disaster. We'd call it actually a necessity. Since, for example, the earth plates lie upon each other and they move in order to keep a balance, so from time to time there'll be the grinding forces and the different causes that will cause an earthquake. If there are no human beings there, take underwater, there are earthquakes, I believe, I don't know how often, but it's quite often, and that's part of the balance. The same idea with a volcano. Volcano is the heat from the center of the earth begins to build up. There's pressures, and at some point it will erupt. If it wouldn't erupt, think of it like a tea kettle where the water is boiling and there's no spout. What would happen? It would explode or implode. So we all need release. It's a release. The winds of this earth that are built by atmospheric and barometric pressures of highs and lows, of heat and cold, of moist and dry, are all a process of so-called rebalancing the earth when there are things that are imbalanced. It's all a process of correcting the dissonance created by the tzimtzum, if you want. If humans were not in its path, a hurricane would just do its harmless thing at sea or wherever it may be. The thing is, when humans are there. Now, that doesn't make it less of a disaster. I'm just pointing out this point. That's not like we want to get rid of hurricanes. They play a role. You want to make sure the hurricanes and humans don't converge. So in truth, if humans did not settle in places, whether it's in certain places where there are these extreme temperatures, or where their plates are tectonic plates that allow for earthquakes, or volcanic regions, we wouldn't be talking about it. But we have settled everywhere. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that's part of reality. So just putting things into context. Now, this doesn't take away, God forbid, from a parent or a child lost during these disasters. The pain is still there, and we cry over it, and we're not trying to minimize it or justify it. But the way to understand the universe is to understand there are many different forces at work. And the lessons we need to learn is wherever we have control, we have to find ways to not eliminate those different forces, but to find that harmony within the diversity. And for that requires a manner of getting beyond our egos and ourself. With natural disasters, all I can say is to comfort each other. And for that matter, anyone that's a victim of a man-made or a natural disaster, our hearts and souls go out and our prayers go out. I want to make sure that's emphasized. There's no way what I'm saying here is in any way to counter that, God forbid. But at the same time, when we look at the bigger picture, and especially when we step back, and we're not talking about the immediate tragedy, what do we learn from it? That we have to do something to rebalance ourselves. Deeper love between our own families and our communities, and yes, and our nations. And to recognize that we're all part of one bigger picture. And indeed, when you see humanitarian aid and how people reach out to each other to help each other, especially in times of disaster, that's part of it. That's part of reclaiming the balance, regaining the balance. So we're not here to talk about why these things happen and what do we do about them as far as, practically speaking, our hearts go out, we reach out to each other, we cry with each other, and we comfort and console each other. On a cosmic level, on a bigger picture, it's a time that it wakes us up to realize that we need to do more in balancing our lives, our internal lives, as well as our intrapersonal and interpersonal lives, and really see ourselves as components of one larger whole. So these are some thoughts that come to mind when hearing and reading and seeing and witnessing first the hurricanes recently, well, not first actually the wars, but recently the hurricanes, and how they all come to contribute to a sense of chaos in this world. But the truth is, the chaos is meant for us to come and create order, to create harmony within the chaos, and realize the chaos itself is a wake-up call and an ability, an opportunity, I should say, that allows us to look at things. You'd rather see chaos than not see it. You'd rather be on the surface, that it's visible, than brewing beneath the surface. And specifically when it is psychologically, you'd rather be able to address it, look at it, and deal with it. And above all, to preempt, that the more we create inner unity and unity among each other, we ultimately create, it affects everything around us, like physics tell us today, quantum mechanics, that the observer is not an observer. We affect the world around us by the mere fact that we interact with it. We see it, even just observing it, affects the world and has an impact. So you can imagine that if we have more harmony within ourselves, it will spill over, and that butterfly ripple effect of creating harmony everywhere around us. Main thing is I want to say, especially as we enter into this the new Jewish New Year, which is really a universal New Year, as I've pointed out. Rosh Hashanah is the birthday, the collective birthday of the entire human race. Yom Kippur is the birth of hope and forgiveness for all of us, that as we enter this new world and this new year, it should become a new world, and we should do our part to tip the scales and bring more harmony into our lives and harmony to the people around us. And it should be indeed a harmonious year, a year where peace prevails, the end of all war and destruction and violence and hatred and darkness. But not just the end of it, a transformation of it all to even a more powerful love and a more powerful connection, recognizing that we're all part of one big picture, of one narrative, and that we, you and I, are not just bystanders and observers, but we are actually part of the unfolding drama, and we impact it and can impact it. And that gives us the power to navigate through it all. We can't control everything that will happen, the circumstances, but we absolutely can control how to navigate and how to help others navigate. May God bless you with that strength and clarity and direction. May we together do our part, each of our parts, and complement each other as part of this larger picture, and indeed create that beautiful cosmic symphony of personal and global redemption. God bless you. Be well. It should be a very, very blessed year. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is our website, our platform for this and many other offerings. Please subscribe to them. Subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. Please share. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your comments, your critique, and all that you have to offer in this symphony. Be well.